that appears to be the case.
Yeah, we are live.
Oh, great. Well, it takes usually about 10 to 15 seconds for people to start showing up. But when they do, they'll see it from the beginning. So this is our Progressive Secular Alliance panel on LGBTIQA plus / Pride. And we wanted to have a panel discussion on this because it's one of our key points of why the group was made. And with us, we have Ian, and we have Comrade Nautica. And if you guys want to introduce yourselves, that would be great. Oh, by the way, I'm Janet Reyes. Pronouns are she, her.
Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
You please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name's Comrade Nautica with the Ministry of Nerd Culture Expropriation. We do memes and podcasts, and tangentially related, one of my podcast series is if I get the words out right, it's called Secular Emphasis on Humanism. I kind of feel like there's a lot of there's not as much emphasis on humanism as there is on secularism in a lot of secular humanist type spaces. So that kind of ties it that. And I'm publishing my third podcast soon, so we'll see how that goes.
Congratulations on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, everyone go watch that. But listen, I'm Ian, also known as Pine Snake. I'm a loudmouth from the UK. My pronouns are he, him.
Oh, my pronouns are she, her. I forgot. I'm sorry.
It's a little bit funny because that was a question, but that's okay. So we have on the agenda, we'll have Comrade Nautica and give us some feedback on the current situation that's going on globally, along with any feelings you may have on what the current status is in the world, and as far as your take.
Okay, so things are a dumpster fire right now. We've got climate change happening. If we don't get that fixed, we're all going to die. And we've got 10 years to do that.
Right.
We've got several types of genocide happening in the U.S. on several different fronts. On the one hand, you've got the immigration issue where there are people being put in concentration camps and deported from the U.S. for not being citizens. And the immigration system is just terrible and dehumanizing and horrible for a lot of reasons. But that we shouldn't be putting people in concentration camps. And I feel like that should be a thing that doesn't need to be said. And
it's pretty shocking.
Yeah, and so there's that generic kind of textbook case of ethnic cleansing going on right now. With regards to quilt bag people, I like that term because it's a lot shorter than LGBTQIA plus, and it's just 2 syllables and it covers the same ground. Quilt bag. I really wish it would take off, but it's more insidious. It's not just. I don't want to say that what's happening to immigrants is bad. That came out wrong. What I'm saying is it's not as on the surface. There is a push by the current presidential administration in the U.S. to strip LGBTQIA plus people, quilt bag people, of our basic human rights as much as possible. It's like, I'm just trying to remember all the different things that have happened lately, but in May it was the HUD putting out rulings on trans people in homeless shelters and seeking housing, and how people could just deny trans people just based on religious beliefs. And healthcare workers, anyone from the receptionist to the nurse to the doctor, can just refuse to treat you because you're trans. And
doesn't it extend to pharmacy?
Say again?
Doesn't that also extend to pharmacists?
Yes, my understanding is yes.
That's what I understood as well. That they could deny you your medicine, your treatments.
And not just like transition related care, like and I said, like, if a doctor or a nurse or anyone in the healthcare profession, anyone in a helping profession like social work, if they aren't willing to provide non-transition related care to their patients, to their clients, they need to find another career because they're going to get people killed.
Whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath?
I mean, it's still there, I guess.
It makes you wonder, like, at what point do they divide their passion to save human life? I mean, are they essentially saying that people who are transgender are not human, or not?
I mean, that's the message.
Basically, what they're saying. If they refuse treatment, then one can only assume that that's what they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big can of worms, and I don't like it because these same people who argue in favor of this stuff also argue in favor of, this perverted idea of free speech. And what they want isn't actually free speech. What they want is to be able to say bigoted things without getting called out on it. And with regard to like medical stuff, they think that it should be a healthcare professional's right to deny care, even emergency care. And, trans people, and we're more likely to be in a position where we need emergency medical care.
Yeah.
So,
all vulnerable population.
Yeah.
Well, this brings another thing. I mean, there's obviously things like HRT from the pharmacist. The doctor needs to prescribe it. Possibly the nurse needs to get involved. But there's also, which is very regular, when a trans person is attacked, are them doctors then still able to refuse life-saving treatment? Literally life-saving treatment.
Yeah, so trigger warning, if you get queasy at body horror type stuff, maybe you might want to stop listening for a few minutes. But I was forced into a position where I had to perform surgery on myself. And at any point in that process, I could have died. I was taking a big risk, and it was a meditated risk. It was a risk I knew I had to take. And from the police who questioned me on scene before allowing the paramedics to take me to the hospital, to the paramedics who pointlessly wanted to examine me even though I had bleeding control taken care of and I just needed to go to the hospital, to the trauma surgeon who questioned my mental health, to the urologist who was throughout the whole process the first kind person to talk to me like I was a person. At any point in that, I could have just been dead on the table. And I almost was. My blood pressure dropped to 70/50. And people don't generally come back from that. And so, yeah.
Not to take you back to that time, but I remember when I first read you telling your story, and it was in the Atheist Experience official discussion group. And some folks were, how do I want to say this? A little judgmental that you had to go to that extreme. And I remember like and feeling such sorrow that in this day and age, when there's treatments available, when there's help available, that you felt you had to go to that extreme to treat yourself. It was rather shocking for just a casual observer.
Yeah.
See the two very, very distinct sides of one of support saying how awful this was that you had to go through that.
Yeah, I don't specifically
horribly bigoted.
Yeah, I don't specifically remember that thread. I mean, it probably.
Oh, I do. It made a really big impact on me.
Oh gosh. Well, I don't specifically remember that thread. I probably made something about it. Okay. So full disclosure, I might as well just tell people what I did. I cut my own testicles out of me, and it was after getting denied 3 times by 3 different providers, twice at the VA, once at a civilian doctor, and I got the idea from the film Hard Candy. I was an EMT, so it seemed legit, like it could possibly work. But going back a bit, though, transition care is medically necessary for those who need it. Testosterone wrecked my whole world. It made me hate myself. It made me hate everyone around me. It made me hate the whole world. I just wanted it all to just stop. My whole life was a Lovecraftian nightmare of skin crawling, feeling just angry all the time for no explainable reason. It was bad. It was bad for me. It was bad for everyone around me. And testosterone blockers, on the other hand, they made me crave salt, something fierce. I was already a savory person because of trauma stuff from childhood. That's a long story in and of itself. But I was putting salt on dill pickles. And
that's a lot of salt.
That is a lot of salt. And like pickles is a running gag in trans woman groups because like the spironolactone is a diuretic and it causes salt cravings, and lots of trans girls eat pickles. So I eat pickles a lot, and I ate a lot of other salty foods, and just salt all the time. I couldn't get enough of it. I never felt satiated. And that's the only way I can describe it, was a craving. And I never got the chance to like get that craving filled. And so on the one hand, I've got testosterone wrecking my whole world and making me and everyone around me miserable. And on the other hand, I've got testosterone blockers, which made me crave salt to a point where I was having heart attack type chest pain, clammy skin, shortness of breath, and, tingling in my left arm, just all the earmarks of a fucking heart attack. Oh, sorry.
You're fine.
All the earmarks of a heart attack. And I did what I had to do. And, lots of people can be judgy for it. But you know what? I made that gamble, and I beat the odds. And
it's like it's working. Erin's joining us. Yay!
Hey, Erin.
Hi.
So do you feel that, let me ask you this, and it's going to be, it might sound bad, but I'm going to ask it because I feel like people would want to know. Do you have any regrets whatsoever about taking that drastic measure?
No.
Didn't think so.
I'm alive, and I'm better than ever.
Yeah.
Like I can't. It's incomparable. Like, I'm still having some health issues that I'm working through, but I would probably be dead if I didn't do what I did.
Do you mind me asking how long ago it was?
February 13th, 2017, 1 p.m. Central Time.
Exactly. I wanted to mention, because I forgot at the beginning, that we will be doing a Q&A at the very end of this. So if anyone watching has questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll address them at the end. And before we get back to Comrade Nautica's story, and I do want to get back to it, I want Erin to introduce herself.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I am Erin Green. Most of everybody who comes on this probably knows me already. Just some stats. I am going to be 59 in, what is this, June? About 3 months. I was married twice in what I like to call my previous life. Brandy knows that better than anybody else, I think, that designation there. I have 2 biological children and 8 grandkids. My family is nothing if not fertile. I'm the oldest of 10, and my mother's the middle of 13. I came out of the closet publicly about a decade ago, without going into too great a detail. And it was only the last 5 years or so that I really started becoming who I am. And just to chime into Brandy's story real quick, not to take away from it, but to add to it, there's a term in the trans community called cutter, and it's basically an illegal surgeon. Whether or not they're actually a surgeon is a different story. And I have off and on for the last 20 years considered using somebody like that. And I have access to sources where I can easily find somebody like that. What's kept me from doing that, in part, is things that have happened, like to Brandy. If I took that step, though, and or through a regular surgeon, and had SRS or GRS or whatever you want to call it, and died on the operating table, I wouldn't care, because it's about being who I am and about making the outside match the inside in one way, in my view. Again, I'm only speaking for myself. I'm also an author and going to have a anthology of short stories published, hopefully self-published in about 2-3 weeks. And I got a kids book, which I'm working with a brilliant artist on. And
very good artist.
I don't know if Brandy's seen any of the images, but if you want, I can pop you some in Messenger and whatever. They're just, oh my God, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely, this artist is absolutely talented beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I, to wrap it up, I had 2 other artists who I paid money to bail on me. And this artist has already done
this one will not bail you.
And so I have a lot more confidence.
I know
this artist.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this artist did my artwork for my online persona, and I absolutely love it. It is amazing.
And I've seen other work she's done, and when the style that she does, which I love, but I was just like, okay, whatever, let's see what she can do, with a kid's book and whatever. And the 2 preliminary sketches that she sent me, the same scene, but 2 little bit different styles. And I just fell in love with the second. I showed it to a whole bunch of my friends, in real life friends at work, and they loved it too. A lot of them are planning on getting the book. And they said, and I told them, I said, it kind of reminds me of the style of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are.
Yeah.
Really phenomenal.
Similar.
So, okay, so go ahead.
That's good stuff.
About my my daughter, who's the artist, I just wanted to say that she came to me almost 2 years ago, crying because she said she doesn't feel like a girl. And I'm crying because she was crying. Sorry. I can't.
That's cool.
I can't imagine the pain that a child has to go through to come out to their family as anything other than cis, normal. Because I'm a very supportive parent, and I told her, it doesn't change anything, of course. But that's one of the reasons why I fight so passionately, because there are so many people who don't have that support. And I can imagine it feels very lonely. So it's a very important topic to me. And I know it is to you, you as well. And clearly, when it's your life, it's even more so important. But I think sometimes people don't understand why I get so enraged. And it's because I have a loved one who is impacted. And I have good friends who are impacted. I have a lot of transgender people on my Facebook who I consider great friends. And it's worth fighting for. And I get so livid, and I can't imagine having to fight that every single day. I just feel so bad. Even for Peter Ethel, who has fought so hard in the videos, and it must get exhausting because it's only been a month for us, and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And people don't have an appreciation for that. And I gotta say, I didn't have an appreciation for that until all of this happened.
The
And
thing is that I've found,
I have a greater understanding of the battle that you all face. I in no way have the same understanding, but I have a better understanding.
with my interactions with people during this, some have saying they fought for 20 years against who they are, just to have to continue fighting once they are able to accept themselves against the bigotry, transphobia, homophobia, insert phobia. And it's actually quite disgusting.
It's amazing to me how we're still here in 2019. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I joined the military back in 1978. I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. There was no way, and I knew I was different from the time I was 6 years old. There was no way I was coming out of the closet then, even though it was this so-called sexual revolution. And, I come from a small rural town in Michigan. When Janet was talking, one of the first things that popped in my head was because of, kids nowadays at least have some measure of support, some options they can go to, lifelines they can call, some people in their family who may not be bigots.
Right.
And even with that, Leila Elkhorn killed herself. And even with that, other transgender and non-binary people kill themselves. And even with that, we still have to fight not just the Stephen Woodfords of the world, but legislators and public figures and celebrities, and
it's just amazing how many people you do have to battle, though. I mean, and it's such a large variety. Like I can understand the fundamentalist Christians who it's that they feel this way. I can understand them. I don't agree with them, but I can understand. I can't understand these other factions. These other groups.
The so-called skeptics.
Well, I think Tracy made a good point within the last week or so that, and I've seen it before, but it was really kind of brought home to me that just because someone leaves religion doesn't mean they leave the bigotry that religion espouses.
Yeah.
And then when you look in greater society and you see transphobia and homophobia and misogyny that is espoused by almost every other group, just to one extent or another, there are you see people constantly. That's why I no longer, even though I still am, obviously, I no longer associate myself as an atheist, purely because of the negative social and societal connotations with it.
Well, this is the thing. I've never been religious. I was never indoctrinated. However, when I was 15, 16 years old, I suffered from extreme Islamophobia to the extent that every problem in my area was because of the Muslims. It just, the BNP was rife at that time. I was at school. I was highly impressionable. Not excuses, but just because I was never religious, it kind of debunks the idea that you leave religion, you leave the bigotry. It's just bullshit.
I want to
behavior, I guess.
I want to say that I want to say that when it comes to atheist-based bigotry, there's a lot of discussion to be had maybe about this idea that don't leave the religion, or you leave the religion but don't leave the bigotry. However, when it comes to things like race realism or anti-trans bigotry, they're not. I mean, they may be leftover vestiges of whatever religious faith they were in, but they couch those prejudices in pseudo-scientific terms. And it's like they'll quote phrenology, the study of studying the bumps on the brain, on the skull, to see how intelligent a person supposedly is. With regard to, well, okay, so maybe Black people's skulls are shaped differently and therefore they are less intelligent than white people. And like, that's literally what some of these people believe. And
the thing about sorry, go on, Comrade. My apologies.
They're couching this stuff in something that resembles an empirical basis. It's not an empirical basis, but they're couching it in those terms, in that idea. They're using that aesthetic. They're using skepticism and rationality as an aesthetic without actually doing the work.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
That's clear.
Well, I was just going to build on that a little bit. It's often put that religion is the reason for the bigotry. No, that's just a reason for hiding the bigotry. My book says this, therefore it is true. But you already believe that to begin with. You don't just... yes, it is a taught trait, but it's not the religion per se. Racism, for example, if you have racist parents, the likelihood of you being racist is significantly increased. But there is nowhere in the Bible it says Black people are stupider than white people, because it's not true. Even the Holy Book knows it's not true. So it's just a cover.
Oh.
There's, when it comes to racism in the Bible, there's a few passages that talk about the way Hebrew servants are to be treated as, indentured servants, and the way non-Hebrew servants are to be treated, which is the chattel slavery that we're all familiar with. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, there's nationalism advocated in the Bible at the very least, and possibly even overt racism. But that
there are quite a few passages in the Bible that directly link to racism. I do agree with Comrade. One of the quotes that I remember the most, and I looked it up because I wanted to get it right, was from Susan B. Anthony, a women's rights activist, and she said, "I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I notice it always coincides with their own desires."
Right.
And I think that pre-bias, if that's the way I want to phrase it, like what you were saying about couching it in scientific terms, I think that works with, or is the mechanism, I should say, behind the bigotry from skeptics as well. I've recently been using an analogy for trans people. If someone came on with a video and said Black people shouldn't be allowed to play with basketball with white people because Black people have a genetic advantage to that over white people in playing basketball, and therefore it's unethical, immoral, disadvantageous, whatever, for black people to play with white people. Therefore, they should be banned from sports. There would be a big hue and outcry about that. And that while that's true, the problem is a lot of people put that claim forth. You know, I use it ironically. I use it but they believe it.
Right. I mean, that is a known, it's a known bias stereotype that, you know, that people say. So I get your analogy there that if it's not okay to say that, even if people believe it, then why is it okay to do that to trans people, even if you believe it? You know, the science doesn't back it up, but it doesn't appear that they're caring about the science.
They're just protecting women's sports, or you know, that phrase is
on the panel for a second that they give a shit about women's sports.
That phrase is a sleight of hand. It's the same sleight of hand used for that was previously used for gay and lesbian teachers. Oh, they're just protecting the children.
Right.
You know, same for transgender bathroom issues. They're just protecting the children. There's never been a case in the United States of a transgender person molesting someone in a bathroom. However, if you want to look up how many white cishet quote unquote Christian males have done it,
welcome back.
You're gonna have quite a Google search. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hey. What happened there?
I'm pulling up this info. There's I want some good news on the whole sports thing. I know it's not real sports because a lot of the wrestling shows are choreographed, but there's a new sports brand that's starting up, All Elite Wrestling. They had a pay-per-view back in May, I think, and there's a trans woman who's wrestling by the name of Nyla Rose, and she is apparently, during the pay-per-view in May, there was no commentary mention of her being trans. It was just on, you know, her in the match doing the wrestling. And I think that's totally great. And I'm excited for that. And I can't wait to see her in action.
I would love to get to the day when that's the case. I would love to that, because, you know, just like other things aren't announced when someone plays sports, that shouldn't be announced when they play sports.
Yeah.
That just shouldn't be a factor. They've been here. Here's the thing, and my entire issue with this outrage and discussion by the so-called rational atheists is that these people have already been tested by experts and been approved to compete by experts. So who are you to question whether or not that person should get to compete when they've already done the battery of tests, they've already gone through the process, and they've already been approved to be competitive with their counterparts?
Don't you just know that you're relying on an appeal to authority fallacy? Eye roll.
But there's already a panel of people who have approved them. And if that, I mean, now I get, and I totally support that if a person has competed and they feel that there was an unfair advantage, that they get to appeal. That should be available to everybody who competes. So if there was, in their opinion, they competed against someone and they felt that someone had an unfair advantage, they should get to appeal. But that panel of experts is there. They're there to set the bar. And if the person has already cleared the bar, I don't know why a panel of non-experts would worry that the experts got it wrong.
See, this is one of the reasons why I keep saying that anti-trans bigotry and atheism and race realism and atheism are the young earth creationism or social issues in general, and a refusal to accept the reality of things. a lot of these skeptic and rational types, they completely reject what the social sciences have to offer when it comes to how to treat people with dignity and respect, and how to interact with people and live in a community and be kind and loving and supportive to one another. And there's like this divide between what they call the hard sciences like cosmology and geology, and the supposedly soft sciences of psychology and sociology, unless it's Paul McHugh or Ray Blanchard who are saying trans people aren't real, and they're like the only psychologists who say that.
I mean, I think that I think that this is a field where we're learning more all the time. And I think that scientifically we're moving in the right direction. So I think that my point is that these experts know the current science. They know the current methods. And the layperson is not going to know that as well. And I don't for a minute believe that they care about the fairness of sports. I don't for a minute believe that they care about women's sports. To me, it's twofold. They want to make the claim that, you know, it's about fairness, but at the same time, it's misogynistic because they're saying that a woman couldn't possibly be as good as a man in sports. And then they're also, of course, trying to negate trans rights.
Well, and you know, there's this whole thing that's been going on the last 2 months, where just show us the science. The science is new. The science isn't that old. The science has been going on for over 100 years. The first SRS was done in 1908. So it's been going on for over 100 years. We've obviously collected more data since then. But the science is there. The body of science is there. And those people, you make a really good point. Those people who, about the flat earth and, you know, young earth creationists, whatever, you know, you have this body of science, and then you have the people who are going, well, it doesn't fit my preconceived notions. Therefore, it's all wrong. You're just SJWs. All you care about is emotions. I had, you know, I'm going to start dropping some names. I had Eric tell me on the phone, Eric Murphy, by the way, of the ACA, asshole community of whatever. But anyway, I had Eric tell me on the phone that this was before before the second Woodford appearance on an ACA production. And we were talking on the phone, and he told me that he was talking with Stephen Woodward, and everything was going fine. And he was telling about how, you know, this video that he put out damages trans people and damages trans people's reputations, and lives, and it affects people negatively, whatever. And he was real somber about that and whatever. And I don't remember the exact wording, but it basically, you know, that he was telling Woodford, you know, that, you know, you regardless of what the science says, you need to treat people with courtesy and address them how they want to be addressed it, and not be misgendered and whatever. And I said, hold on a second. I said, you do realize that HRT changes the body physically, not just mentally, physically. There are bone structure changes, there are muscle changes, muscle mass changes, there are muscle density changes, there are bone density changes. It even changes the shape of your skull. So to sit there and say, well, and it completely blew him away. He had no clue whatsoever. So when you talk about the lay people not knowing anything, that's just flat out. And I agree with you completely. I've had more than one physician, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, a medical personnel in any way. I worked like you for a long time in the medical field. And I've had two doctors that I worked with when I worked at the hospital tell me that I knew far more about this situation than they did. You know, because it is, I only get one body.
Do you feel it's a situation where you have to know because you're constantly defending?
Yup.
That's part of it. Also, you know, I had a friend who decided that she was going to, because she lived in Minnesota, and she went, you know, through the whole gatekeeping process and got her 2 letters, and, you know, she spent, I don't know how much money, you know, going to therapists and whatever before she finally got, you know, started getting just on medications, let alone any sort of surgery. And so she decided she was going to hurry up the process, and she was going to buy hormones online, which you can do, and double it basically. And this worked for her for about 3 years, and then she got a blood clot and went to the hospital for a couple of days and can't ever take hormones again. It'll kill her. And so this, you know, so this idea that Woodford or any of his crew or anybody who supports that sort of bigotry that he's espoused knows what they're talking about is ludicrous on the face of it. Just as just one example that was pointed out in more than one video by EOT, the cyclist that he used in his example in his first video, oh no, she won against a cis woman. Okay, well, yeah, that's true. What he failed to mention was that she lost 10 of the previous 12 races she ran against this woman.
Right. So
he didn't want to mention. No,
it's a case of being a dishonest, whether, you know, what we call a bad actor. You know, I mean, in my opinion, and I'm only speaking for myself, I believe Rationality Rules is a bad actor. He's purposefully put out bad information, and in some cases outright lied. And I know initially we were hesitant, we as a group were hesitant to label him as transphobic. We said that his video was transphobic, but we didn't label him himself as transphobic. I have since then, because he's released multiple videos since that time of I've gone full circle on that, and I can't believe that it's not purposeful. So he's a transphobe.
I just want to get one thing in right quick with regard to the claim that Woodford is a transphobe. Okay, so there were 2 videos put out by him before this whole thing. There was
Jordan
one.
Peterson is not a Christian.
Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and he agreed with them on the fact that trans people don't exist. Basically, that's what he agrees with them on. So you can't tell me, you can't sit here and tell me that, you know, by you I mean anyone who would tell me this. Right. I can't be convinced that he didn't do this from a place of malice, because he's demonstrated that he has malice towards trans people, and he has an anti-science bias towards trans people.
Right. We were given the line that he had changed his mind and had learned, you know, so although I didn't want to, and to a good extent I didn't, I gave him a little bit of time to come out and say, you know, hey, I was wrong. And when he came out with his apology, that was it for me. Because first of all, it wasn't an apology.
It was a non-apology.
It was a non-apology. And secondly, I have a trans friend is about as offensive as you can get. And I don't care if your one trans friend comes online and, you know, cheerleads for you. There were trans people telling you that you were harming them. So if you have one that says, oh, I wasn't hurt, it doesn't matter, because there's others saying they were.
That's what happened when I went after Mr. Atheist on Twitter, because he did the same thing. He tagged a trans friend of his, and she jumped in to defend him, and she didn't do very well. But yeah, and the whole thing about you know, not you specifically, but people not calling him a transphobe, I likened it this way, and I hesitate to invoke Godwin's law, but it's not quite to that level. But you know, there were German carpenters who supported Hitler. There were German artists who supported Hitler. There were German bakers who supported Hitler. They're Nazis. doesn't matter why they supported him. It doesn't matter if they supported him because they're nationalists. It doesn't matter if they supported him because they were afraid of losing their jobs. It doesn't matter if they supported him because they, you know,
Well,
feared immigration or liked his
can we be clear on one thing? There's support in that you're a SS soldier supporting Hitler. There's that kind of support, that you're on the ground being a support. And then there's the kind of support that we took offense to, that for some reason people didn't understand. There's the kind of support that sits back and says, not my problem. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not anti-trans, but I'm not going to tell Woodford he's being transphobic.
And that's
three
exactly
groups
of support as well.
And that little Twitter fight.
In any human rights issue, there are three groups of people: two minorities and one majority. One is the one that is being persecuted.
Mm-hmm.
That is a minority. A minority who is actually doing the persecution, and then there's the majority who stand by idly and make excuses. Misogyny is a prime example. Trans rights is another. Racism, any issue you can think of, this dynamic always shows up. And when we get the silent majority to realize what the actual issue is, we can actually start working on many of these problems in society.
But I just want to throw in there that now there's some of those people who were initially supporting Woodford who said, learned, he's changed his mind, he's going to put out this video to prove it. And now that it's clear that he didn't change his mind, because the second video basically said the same thing as the first, except for, you know, now he's got, you know, a transgender. There are a couple people who are like, well, I don't agree with it. And now they're putting out a statement or here or there saying, you know, I don't agree with what they said, that, you know, that video has, you know, either they, like Mr. Atheist actually said that he doesn't agree with, what did he say? Something about the women competing, trans women competing in athletics are women, period, or something like that. But he never addressed Woodford. He never addressed the videos. He never.
Actually, I have the.
Oh,
I
he did a footnote.
I have the tweet right in front of me because I screen capped it,
Yeah.
and he sort of does. So I don't want to completely disagree with you. He does, but in a bad way. Okay. The tweet said, this was on June 17th. Mr. Atheist, the Pumpkin King. And he says, I am 100% in support of trans athletes competing in sports in their gender category, full stop. Okay. Then he says, RERR's videos. When, if I decide to make a video, I will do so because for my own reasons and not to satisfy demands from people who treated me and others in completely bad faith. Okay, so first of all, what he's doing there,
but that's not condemning. That's not condemning.
Right, he's again running away from Woodford's video. That's exactly what he did. When I had this little Twitter spat with him, he did everything he could to condemn transphobic videos, even to the point, you know, but then he's not a bad actor, to use your phrase, because A, he called out his trans friend, and B, he said, and I quote, I'm pansexual, I can't be transphobic. And then, you know, when especially the last part here, and not to satisfy demands from people who treated me and others in completely bad faith. My bad faith was pointing out his problems, his hypocrisy, his cowardice. Apparently, he doesn't like that. The same thing, Matt Dillahunty directly called me a liar. I've yet to see him prove any of that. And you know, when this first, in fact, I think it was the show he had before all this broke open. It was his birthday show, and he went on this long rant about the, you know, birthday card from his mom. But prior to him doing that, it was the National Day of Visibility. And I don't remember his exact words, but he made some statement about how he supported trans people and whatever. Okay. And it's easy to support that when, you know, it's just lip service. It's easy to support that when your privilege allows you not to feel anything. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about walking down the street. And even if you're not trans yourself, you don't have to worry about walking down the street and having somebody, call you names or cast slurs on you because you have a trans friend walking with you.
Or physically.
I've had that happen. Right. I've had that happen to me in a quote unquote college town, which is, supposedly a little less backward than a lot of other, tiny rural communities. But, so this whole idea to shorten it, because I'm Irish, I don't do long story short. This whole idea that, some people are afraid to call, and I'm not casting aspersions on anybody specific, but some people are afraid to call Woodford a transphobe. I'm not afraid at all. I knew right from the get-go he was.
I mean, I can understand not wanting to, though, because what happened to those of us who did, where we were attacked in mass.
Right. And I completely understand that. I guess I'm talking more about the logic of it rather than the social structure.
I'm saying
I got logic.
However, if you're a content creator and you claim to be trans supportive and you buddy up to these people and don't call them out on their shit, I take issue.
How are you?
I take issue with that. You can be an everyday person and who doesn't have a channel or even maybe one not of influence and not take a stand. But if you cannot be somebody who puts goddamn pumpkins in your stupid name because you think that that's some kind of allyship to LGBT and then not call out this clear transphobia.
And you know what gets me, and I'm not sure.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if other people understand the distinction here. Okay, this whole pumpkin thing started because, oh, by the way, McMurdy's videos on YouTube, yanked. His channel is banned. This homophobic, transphobic, whatever preacher. But anyway, he went after Mr. Atheist because he called him gay. Not because he called him trans, because he called him gay. Okay.
Right.
And so different people in the community went after him. Okay. And so many people, trans and NB people, and I'm not sure if that's a separate term. I could be mistaken, but many people understand that there's long been a history of anti-trans sentiment in the LGBT community.
What got
we've
me?
Had video
Just before
after
we move
video
on.
after video of people in pride parades, especially males, white cis gay males, make anti-transgender statements over and over and over and over again. And what happened with the HRC was, and I still refuse to support them to this day. They can kiss my big white Irish ass. What happened with the HRC was, for decades, for years, they said, "Oh well, just be the good little peon, and vote for us, and and send us money, and we'll get you included in any ENDA legislation next year."
Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
We're going to focus on the gays and lesbians. So, sorry,
The
go ahead.
thing about the military.
One little point real quick. I don't have the issue with people putting the pumpkin in their names and showing allyship to being against someone who was clearly homophobic. What I have an issue with is people putting pumpkins in their names and not showing allyship when allyship is needed. So is it a display or are you truly an ally? And I have seen way too many instances with people saying they're allies and putting this symbol as if it spoke to being an ally, but failing to follow through with actions. That's what I wanted to say.
The McMurtry thing with Jimmy, call him gay and various slurs, which Jimmy's pan, he be him. there were trans people coming out in droves to support Jimmy and say, look, I'm here for you. What can I do? Where was the trans people support? Where was the network coming from straight, gay, lesbian, whatever? Where was the trans people support? It was severely lacking at a time when their being was called into question. You're not women. It was basically the overall synopsis of the videos. And then for Woodford to then go forward and say they always had this advantage. It may not have played any part, but the advantage was there. Really kicks the athletes in the teeth that have been training for weeks, months, leading up to a massive competition and putting the effort in and really trying the hardest. As Erin said earlier, losing 10 out of 12. For those 2 that they won, they had just put masses of effort into actually their craft. And that seems one of many things that really got to me.
It seems to be a key element that they don't take into account, that your physical self only gets you so far. You can have, I went to school with this guy who was almost 7 foot tall. And everyone always asked him, oh, you play basketball? And he was like, no, I don't play basketball because I suck at it. And people just automatically assumed because he was tall that he played basketball. And it leads to your point that just because somebody has a physical advantage does not mean they have the skill to do well at a sport. And every athlete who is competing hones their skill. So a physical ability can only get you so far. And then your work and dedication and efforts have to get you the rest of the way. And that is not factored in at all by rationality rules.
I just have a small joke on this matter. These transphobes who say that trans women have some advantage over cis women in sport are also the same people who are saying that we have a negative impact on military readiness. But the reality of the situation is all trans women are white-knuckling the pickle jar, crying to gods that don't exist because we can't get the damn thing open.
Exactly.
I mean, that is funny, but it's funny because it's true, because you're right. I had not thought that these same people who are complaining that there's this advantage physically in sports are the same people who are saying, oh, but they shouldn't be serving in the military. You're absolutely right. I had not thought about that. That's great.
I really kind of want to shift this discussion a little bit and look at the broader picture when it comes to trans stuff right quick, because a lot of people, like, I hear the same arguments over and over again. I do honeypots on my personal Facebook page to get people who disagree with me to come and talk to me so that I can, give them a couple comments to see what they say, shut them down, and then block them because I'm tired of them. But it's like Matt Dillahunty hanging up the phone on the Atheist Experience. It's wonderful. But
goodbye, you piece of shit. Click.
But, I hear the same arguments over and over again that, sexual dimorphism, there's only 2 genders.
Yes.
Penis equals man, vagaloo equals woman, and it gets tired and it gets boring. And when you look at human history, you look at anthropology, you look at archaeology, you look at, biology even, and you look at all these different sciences, and all these different sciences say, there are more than 2 genders. There are more than 2 biological sexes, and the idea, our current ideas of the rigid binary with rigid roles and rigid ideas of what specifically makes a man and what specifically makes a woman are fabrications. They're constructs.
Correct.
And, you know, I keep hearing, with regard to my face fuzz specifically, I freaking love my face fuzz. It feels so nice. I like stroking it. I don't know why. Autism, you know, sensory stuff. I like it. And a lot of people tell me, well, women don't grow face fuzz. And I'm like, yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Cis women are trained from a very young age to pluck and tweeze and wax and shave and any sign of facial hair. They are taught to get rid of it.
That's correct.
Because they are trained to appease male standards of, you know, what cis het guys would want. And my queerness, my womanhood is not centered on the pleasures of cis het men. It's for me. And, you know, and speaking to standards of what makes a man, what makes a woman, what makes a non-binary person, I have rigid standards for that stuff. And the only standard that matters is what a person says they are. That's it. Anything else, and we run the risk of just completely shutting out people from the community in really horrible ways.
I think that's one of the things that I was pointing out earlier, was that what people currently accept for understanding on gender and sexual identity is constantly being updated and challenged as we learn. And I think that, well, we just went through that video that I reviewed for you.
I appreciate that very much, by the way.
Sure, no problem. And people could not put their heads around the idea that it's a social construct. And I don't understand how they don't understand, because it really is. One of the examples they used is like, oh, people could have said that blonde people were men and brunettes were women. And then, you know, as they observed more, they could see that that wasn't true. And they're like, well, that's how we know that there's only two biological sexes. And I'm like, but that's based upon what they knew at the time. When they said, you know, in this false, you know, situation, that blondes were one thing and brunettes were another, that was to their understanding at the time. So now that we know that it's not just binary, it's a denial of science to say that it is. We have learned that it's not.
I think your example,
the community not adhering to what they say that they do, which is, you know, if the science says it, they follow it. Well, they're not following it.
I have one more thing I want to add.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Trans people are a very resilient population. We deal with so much shit and have dealt with so much shit for so many centuries. You know, we've survived colonialism, we've survived the Nazis, and we're going to survive the alt-right. We're going to keep surviving. We are going to keep thriving. And I mean, atheists who are rational and pragmatic, they should want us on their side because we get shit done.
Yes.
I think your example of conflating all this anti-trans stuff to young earth creationism, and then what Janet just said really resonates with me, because let's take the subject of geology. Okay. 200 years ago, 400 years ago, you know, there were a lot of people who were convinced that the earth was flat. There were a lot who weren't, but there were a lot who were convinced that the earth was flat. There are some today who are, but anyway, so we have come along a long way in that 400 years with the study of geology, with the study of earth sciences, with the study of tectonics, plate tectonics. And so we have this huge body of scientific knowledge, and yet we still have people who build their own rocket and launch themselves into, you know, what they consider to be space, because they're going to prove that the earth is flat. So you have your science deniers. And then my other quick point is, I've used this phrase before, that transgender people are by necessity a shell of Kleenex surrounding a core of adamantium steel. You know, there are things that might tear us a little bit here and there. There are things that might bother us a little bit there, but when it gets down to it, at the end of the day, we're going to keep on. And I don't give a shit what people like Woodford say. I don't give a shit what people like Dillahunty say. I don't give a shit what people like Mr. Atheist says. You know, whether it's a politician or whether it's a celebrity or whatever, we are going to keep on, and we are going to keep expanding the knowledge and refuting the bigotry that gets displayed over and over,
Right.
and break away from this white cishet male 1950s. Everything was perfect then, because it was about white cishet males then. And, you know, all the black people knew their place, and the women knew their place, and the kids were, you know, seen but not heard, and whatever, you know, because white cishet male was all that mattered. And suddenly, you know, for a lot of these people who support the type of transphobia and homophobia and misogyny that Woodford expounds, that's a big part of their fear, is that they're no longer going to be as relevant. They're not going to be the rulers of the roost. They're not going to be the majority anymore, and they're scared shitless of that.
Can I ask you real fast? I'm sorry. It just dawned on me, and I was reading the comments, so this is me being distracted as well. That I don't have an answer to this, so I thought I'd ask you both. Tracy had brought up, and I apologize to Tracy in advance because I'm going to bungle this. I know it. How the word transition could even be, because it implies that you weren't always a woman, for example. It says, you know, saying you transitioned from a man to a woman implies that when you were, before you had a surgery, for example, that you weren't a woman, but you were.
That's a word we need to change. I mean, I've heard gender affirmation care.
What do you think would be a better term?
Gender affirmation care.
Okay. Okay, because I would like to put into my vocabulary trans positive words, and
Yeah.
all the time. And I do not in any way whatsoever claim to be the best at things, but I do try, and I want to be like, one of the things I learned was when I mentioned your topic back on the atheist experience, someone had used the term that you had mutilated yourself, and
My incision was that big.
It was really not transpositive, because it wasn't a mutilation. You know, it was a self surgery, and it wasn't a mutilation. And at the time I was like, I understand why they use the word, but you want to make sure that you're being transpositive, and to work those words out of your vocabulary. And so if transition is not the word that we should use, then I would like to use the proper wording.
If somebody went through, let's say somebody didn't have insurance and they had a skin tag. I don't know if everybody knows what that is, but it's kind of like a mole, but it's bigger, and it's usually flesh colored. It's, you know, it's not dark or discolored or anything, and it's just there.
Pretty benign.
You know?
Yeah.
And they said, you know what, I can't afford to go to the doctor. I'm going to take some Tylenol and get a bottle of tequila, and I'm going to get rid of this thing.
Tequila or the skin tag?
Well, in my case, it would be Guinness. But anyway, you know, because I'm fucking Irish. It's the law, you know. But so they do all this stuff. They self-medicate. Boom, they're done. Nobody would criticize them.
Right.
Insofar as the level of hatred that we get as trans people. And it's because we are taught from birth that our sexuality, our gender, whatever the social construct is in the area that it is key to our being. It is reinforced over and over and over in jokes and plays and kids' toys and pink aisles of toys at the store versus blue aisles of toys at the store, and big for women, because apparently, women can't hold pens that aren't pink, and
Right.
Go ahead.
With regard to my situation,
go
ahead. I didn't just do that on the fly. I didn't do that in a state of mental anguish. I was very cold and calculating. I sat on that for 2 weeks. And this was after 6 months and 3 denials of service from qualified professionals. So what I did with my DIY Orky was not mutilation. I didn't, and my preparation, I prepped for it like I would any other procedure. I didn't eat for 24 hours before. I didn't drink to numb the pain. I used an ice pack and a hair tie tourniquet and an hour. So, I knew what I was doing. And like I said, my incision was 1.5 inches long, and you can't even see the scar anymore. So when I hear people say that I mutilated myself for doing what I needed to do to take care of myself, I can't. No, that's not at all correct. That's not at all accurate.
This reminds me.
Sorry, go ahead, Ian. There's a little bit of a lag on my end, so I keep accidentally for people. Go ahead.
This reminds me of another issue that seems to be prevalent in America at the minute that will lead to this kind of situation, and it's like the Alabama abortion bill. If people can't get it within their home state, they'll either do it themselves or go to somewhere where the medical practices aren't to as high a standard. And it is really dangerous. You should have been able to go to your doctor and get adequate care, and them actually take your consideration into account. And it really sounds like they haven't done that. And you've had
that surgery is astronomical. First of all, it would have been a huge delay between, you have to go through all of these steps before you can have the surgery. All the evaluations and medical appointments, and testing and hormone treatment and everything. But once you even got past all of that and got to the point of surgery, that surgery would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars probably. I don't know how much it is these days, but it used to be quite expensive. And you guys probably know more what the cost is right now than I do. It's a lot of money.
Comrade, if you don't mind me asking, if your doctor had have said, okay, this is something we will explore, let's go through the process and see where it gets to, would you still have been in a position where you felt you had to take that action?
I'm not understanding your question. Like, if the doctor had given me the care that I requested.
Yeah, with an end goal of the surgery.
I could have worked with that.
Yeah.
I could have worked with that. But all I was getting was denials that I was experiencing what I was experiencing, denials that, it was actually care that I needed. I had one doctor tell me he had ethical concerns, but wouldn't expand on what those ethical concerns were. And I just... And my primary care doctor at the VA was amazing through all of this. She was super supportive. She was doing what she could on her end, and she was amazing. And when I came to the next morning, and the next time I saw my doctor, she told me that she literally broke down and cried when she found out what I had done, because she was.
One of the reasons I think that people are driven to that extreme, like what Comrade was, and I've contemplated and still often sometimes contemplate, is because of that whole gatekeeping mentality. There's I always want to call it HIGBA, but that's it's the Harry Benjamin Gender Identity Association Standards of Care. It's called the SOC, which most people, they abbreviate to that, 3 letters, the SOC. And it has a list of what you need to do to get authorized for surgery in the United States. It doesn't affect any other country, but in the United States. A lot of people fly to Thailand. A lot of people. Some of my friends have flown to Thailand. Because it's, by the time you fly to Thailand, get the surgery, and not just the genital surgery, but any other surgery, breast augmentation, or breast removal if you're trans man, whatever, all that stuff, and fly back home, it's still cheaper than the United States. Number one. But number two, for years, for over a decade, on this panel that oversaw all these regulations, well, guidelines and whatever, okay, they didn't let any transgender people be on the panel. The analogy that I've used is, okay, let's have a panel on African American affairs as relates to the community, but we're not going to let any black people on the panel.
Oh, you mean like the abortion?
That's exactly what it was. Right. And then, but back to the gatekeeping thing, people were denied surgery because they're too tall, because they're too old, because their hands were too big, because they weren't feminine enough. And so, then you get these people at that time, they went through all the steps they were supposed to. They got their letters. If they got them, you were supposed to get 2 letters of from a therapist regarding the surgery and whatever, and then get turned down on top of that because of that. Yeah, you went and got your 2 letters. You paid, what is $100 an hour, or whatever it is. Maybe if you're lucky on a sliding scale to get your 2 letters. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "No, we can't do that because you're too tall." Right? Yeah, and so this whole gatekeeping mentality is slowly eroding. It's not fast enough in my opinion, but it's slowly eroding. I went to I got my letter. You only need 1 now, at least here in Michigan. You only need 1, and I got my letter 3 months ago, I'm guessing now. Went to the therapist, got my letter, like he faxed it right then and there at the end of the meeting. And went to the doctor and had to go through 8 or 9 lab draws, all at once, but 8 or 9 different lab tests before they would even consider prescribing hormones. Then I came back for another meeting with the PA, who talked about, she and I talked about what I wanted to do, and the office has been supportive all the way, don't get me wrong. Then I had to come back for another meeting with the doctor herself. And then I finally got the prescription for hormones, and I got, Comrade knows, I got Spiro and I got Estradio. Okay.
I don't want to be that guy, but your medical system is fucked. The medical system here is you go to your general practitioner, they start you on the process, but they also book you in with a specialist. What the process is here, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know whether it's straight to the HRT or anything like that, but they at least give you the information and they don't put barriers in your way. And all the way up until the surgery, they're, by and large, officially, the NHS is supportive. Certain doctors may have issue.
There's a lot of insurance that don't even cover it here. It's not even a covered. There are some insurance companies that cover treatments and surgeries, but there are some that do not. So there are people who don't have any options to seek that.
I work.
Are you sure you don't want to be a part of the empire?
I've had people. I've had one particular individual offer me to come to Norway and accidentally forget to go home.
I've got a spare room here.
And I have my company that I work for. I'm not going to name them specific. I'll just call them Big Blue Box Mart. Okay. 4 years ago or 5 years ago, changed their surgery to authorize and pay for HRT, therapy, and surgery. The whole 9
That's
yards.
great.
And of course, deductibles and HRA plans and whatever, all the usual garbage. But very in the company in general, the corporate policies of the company, and then the company, the store in particular where I work at, has been very, very, very supportive of me. So I've been very lucky in that regard. But yeah, there are a lot of people who can't afford this, and much as I love the success of the Jazz Jennings and the Janet Mocks and the Laverne Coxes, there are people who, we're not the pretty people. We're the people who, as one person put it, looks like a linebacker in a dress. We're the people who don't fit the pretty mold. We're people who don't fit the handsome mold when you're a trans man. And so, we get this, I'm to top it off, I'm 6'2" tall. So I get stares regardless. I'm out in the public every day. I'm very out and open.
It's probably
I don't.
Play basketball because you have an unfair advantage, Erin.
What's that?
That's a joke.
I didn't hear you.
I said it's a good thing you don't play basketball or you'd have an unfair advantage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I suck at basketball too. I love Brad Garrett's joke. He's the one who played the brother on Everybody Loves Raymond. He's 6'8". When he was on the Johnny
Right.
one time, he said, I always wanted to respond. People ask, how's the weather up there? He said, I always wanted to go, it's raining. But, but so I'm very out and open. I did have one person, I mentioned this on my Facebook a while ago, came up to me and said, Erin, and I'm looking around, I don't recognize the voice, whatever, and I got a big cart of stock that I'm working on, and I'm looking around. Finally, he kind of pops his head around the end of the stock, and he says, I just wanted to let you know that I have a son who's transgender, and he looks up to you. He doesn't want to say anything to you because he's shy, but he looks up to you, and he appreciates the fact that you're just out here in the community, and just being yourself. And that's all I wanted to say. And he turned around and walked away. I have no clue who it was, or who anything. So, but despite, like I was saying earlier, despite the Janet Mocks and the Jazz Jennings and all that stuff, and I love, we have the Leela Elkhorns who commit suicide because of the pressures that we face. And, it just tears me up that much as I've had the shit I've had to deal with, in part now, I'm almost 60. I don't give a fuck what people's attitude is, but when you're 14 and you're just coming to grips with this, and you're coming to grips with who you are as a person, and your family may not be supportive like Janet is. I've said, not just of Janet, but of quite a few of my friends, I wish I'd had them as a mother. Because I wouldn't have gone through a lot of the stuff that I would have gone through. I hung myself when I was 14. And like a lot of people, I didn't leave a note. I didn't, of course, this was 1974, so there was no internet, there was no Facebook, there was, people are like, what? But and the only thing that saved my life, we were, my dad was remodeling in the basement, and so my quote-unquote bedroom was just 2x4s frame, and he hadn't put anything else up yet, and there was one running across the top, the doorway, and it wasn't supported by anything, it was just nailed in place, and I hung myself with a rope, and I just stepped off a chair. And the only thing that allowed me to survive was that my weight pulled the board loose, and I fell to the floor, split my chin open. I still have a scar and an indentation right here. I woke up in a pool of blood. My mother, 3 or 4 days later, I was living at my dad's at the time. They had divorced a long time before that. And I went back to her for visitation, and she made the joke about how we were at some kind of gathering. And she made the joke about how it looked like I committed suicide, tried to hang myself or whatever. And I don't remember what excuse I used, but it was something, whatever. And I just kind of laughed it off. But because I knew at that point, there was no way I was coming out to my mother. There was no way I was coming out to my dad. and I tried a couple more times over the years. And so, but having all the resources that I have at my command now, and the ways to fight off depression, because I suffered from chronic depression, and I have SAD. I've been diagnosed as bipolar, ADHD, and so I have all this crap to go through, and all this fight to go through on a daily basis. On top of which, being transgender and having to deal with that, and I'm able to fight in part because of people like you two, and also Comrade, because we fight side by side. When you're 14, you don't have that. When you're 14, you only have your family. You only have the kids at school. So when I see stories like in the UK about a transgender girl who was choked to the point of passing out, or one who's almost died because the kid was stepping on her head or whatever. I don't remember the exact details, but a couple different cases anyway. And that happens over and over and over and over in the United States. There's got to be a way to push. I no longer accept the status quo. There's got to be a way to push for a better future and a better present than what we have now.
I think that you touched on some good issues with regard to mental health. Anytime someone denigrates someone for mental illness, I automatically just don't trust them anymore. I can't, because to be well-adjusted in the society in which we exist, you have to be pretty heartless to be completely okay with the society in which we exist.
Exactly.
You have to be spiteful of all of humanity that's not just like you. And when I hear people say that trans people are mentally ill, and when I hear atheists say that religious people are mentally ill, and when I hear people suggest that mentally ill people don't deserve rights, I'm just like, y'all do realize that we are far more likely to be abused and to face violence and discrimination for having mental health issues than we are to hurt other people. We are very aware of how our brains function. We are very aware of how our internal workings are. Far more aware of our internal emotional landscape than people who don't have mental health issues. And we are so much better at communicating our needs and setting boundaries as a result. And I really hate this argument that says that says that trans people are mentally ill simply because we're trans, and that's false. And literally every single mental health and medical organization says that we're not.
Including who?
Including the World Health Organization. But it's so frustrating. I don't fully remember where I was going with that, but it basically, to say that people who have mental health issues don't deserve rights, and couch that however you want. If you go see a therapist, if you go, if you are taking mental health medications, if you are, diagnosed with something and not in treatment, just carte blanche, none of them deserve rights. That's really fucked up. And that's going back to a time when, people were treated like shit just because their brain didn't work the way the dominant society wanted it to.
I think that mental health is a spectrum, just like everything else that we learn about medicine and people. Because I don't think I know a single person who doesn't have some sort of issue. And if they don't, it's probably because they're hiding it. Everyone faces some type of mental health crisis at some time or another. Panic attacks or, something as simple as just, being highly susceptible to stress. Everyone faces it. And we have to get away from the stigma that seeking help for mental health issues is a weakness. And because it's simply, in some cases, a physiological thing where you can just get a medicine to make you feel better. And in other cases, is you don't have that support system that Erin was talking about, and you need someone to be on your side and someone to listen. And I want to, this is one of my areas that I am an activist in, is raising awareness for mental health, because there is such a stigma tied to it. So I feel like, and one of the things that really would make me angry, like you said, Comrade, was saying that people who were indoctrinated or people who are religious are mentally ill. They're not mentally ill. They were indoctrinated, and they sometimes don't even think to question it, and that doesn't make them stupid, and it doesn't make them crazy.
Does that also mean that the 3 people here that were religious all of a sudden, just like that, lost that mental illness?
Right, and deciding that, for example, deciding that you're leaving religion didn't make me smarter. I didn't wake up one day and say, you know what, I believe in God, and all of a sudden you have a PhD. It doesn't happen. You don't get smarter just because you become an atheist.
Swallow, Erin.
You don't get less crazy because you get rid of, and I say crazy because that's what they say. That's what people say. They'll look at that people who are religious and say, oh, that person's crazy for believing that you can make a wish, via a prayer and things happen. That's not mental illness. That's how they were raised, and it's all kind of related, like you were saying, Comrade, because that's the same kinds of things that you're raised with, these implicit biases that you're raised with that say, Black people are different, transgender people are different, homosexual people are different, and therefore you have this bias that's built into your psyche from the time you're born. Religion is the same way, and this seeking help for mental health issues is, we don't talk about that. No, we need to talk about those things, and we need to have these discussions about the gender spectrum, and we need to have these. In some ways, we need to have these people like Rationality Rules to bring these issues and show himself to be a bigot, so that other people can start talking about these things. And yes. I'm not promoting that what he said was good, because it did do harm, but at the same time, it also raised some awareness. And I'm happy to have met some really good allies and friends and some people in the LGBTQ community. And I'm sorry, what was that acronym that you had used earlier?
Quilt bag.
Thank you.
What is it?
Quilt bag.
Oh, yeah.
Quilt bag.
Queer, quilt bag. Undecided, intersex, lesbian, trans, bi, asexual, aromantic, and gay.
You'll spell it out for me later.
I would love for you to put a topic up about that later, so that we can continue the discussion, because I think it's something that's a lot easier to roll off the tongue. But I think that it's important to have these discussions so that we can find that community. And this entire group was built because of this huge disdain that we had for the bigotry. And I don't regret that. I regret the harm that was done and the attacks that you all have endured.
Yeah,
I don't regret conversations.
Yeah, opening up about mental illness and other aspects around it is so important, because then we can actually finally put to rest the things like gay conversion therapy or the Christian counselors and all the rest of them, the ones that hide in the shadows because it's this taboo subject, so they can operate, they can grow. And by having it being more open and people being able to speak about what's troubling them is going to help. And for the minor mental health issues, people just calling it baggage and dismissing it as just, you know, that person's got baggage, actually harms more, because it actually makes the people feel like, oh, this isn't a problem, but I'm still worrying about it, or whatever. And it exacerbates the issue and makes it even more of an issue down the line.
I wonder too if part of the stigma for mental challenges isn't, and this isn't a condoning or an excuse in any way, but more what I see maybe as a mechanism is that for centuries, for millennia, quote unquote crazy people were avoided, just as physically sick people were, because they thought it was catchy. And I wonder if that's a holdover, you know. I lived in DC, downtown DC, and I lived in downtown Los Angeles. And you'll see somebody who's living on the street clearly, obviously has mental issues. Either they're talking to themselves or yelling at themselves or whatever. And people will, when they walk by, they will walk, and even if the person is not physically close to them in any way, they'll kind of shy away, or they'll walk across the street or whatever. It's almost like there's this physical space barrier that they want to put between themselves and a person who's that different, so that they don't catch whatever they think it is. And I wonder if that's part of the mechanism behind not just the transphobia, but behind any sort of bigotry or phobia against people who are different, because you don't want to catch. In part, I think it's because, and maybe a small part, but because if the four of us are in a community and suddenly Janet starts showing symptoms of something that's completely different and out of the way and unusual and normal, you don't want to be around that. You don't want to be associated with that because of how you see other people treat her. And you don't want to be treated like that. And I think that's part of the mechanism behind some of the, I don't want to say the extremism, but the widespread, I don't know, I'm not
the
sure
silent majority.
Right, but the spread of it among a larger group of people is because, if I'm grow up as a gay male person or a gay female person, to use my own pronouns, and I see how society treats a gay male or a gay female, I'm gonna avoid that, trying to be associated with that as much as possible, because I don't want that treatment for myself.
Right. We probably should wrap this up because we've been going on for almost 100 minutes now. And it seemed like much shorter because this has been a really interesting conversation. So I really appreciate your time. But I kind of wanted to see if we could end it on, I honestly don't remember seeing very many questions. I did see a question that I think only, and I'm not, I don't want to assume, but I think only one of us would declare themselves truly cis, hetero. I saw a question about that earlier, but I would say that too. I know I say that I'm cis, but I don't consider myself heterosexual. But the question that I saw that I thought was interesting, and I'm just going to ask this real quick, and everyone can answer because I think that it's actually an interesting question, was what does it feel like to be cis? And I say everyone can answer because I want to hear your answer of what it feels like to be not cis, like what that felt like to be
liberated,
not in congruence with your mind. I am cis, so I wanted to answer that question, and it is kind of it's almost a comical thing in my mind, because that's something that we don't think about, but that's something we should think about. So like, what's it feel like? You have that privilege of not having to ever think about that. That's what it feels like. It feels like privilege, because I've never had to think about what does it feel like. You feel like you match. You feel like you're normal, So I don't know how else to describe how it would feel to somebody who's not cis. You're so privileged. Not only do you feel within yourself that you were born and live the way that you were meant to be, but society doesn't treat me any differently for it. They treat me as the standard. So it's in every way a privilege. So I guess that's my answer. How does it feel? It feels like privilege. So Ian, do you want to tackle that? Like, I don't know if you have anything to add, or maybe it feels differently to you.
Well, I take the privilege a couple of steps further than what you've just described. I'm cis, white, male, heterosexual. I'm 35 to 55. I am of medium to upper education. I'm going back to learn more. I have a stable, steady job. So I hit pretty much all the target points for privilege. And as you say, you don't have to think about it. But especially over the last couple of months, but more extensively over the past couple of years, it's actually almost depressed me. The fact that I see all these social issues that could be relatively easily dealt with by people like me, but they put their head in the sand, or they're openly bigoted. Art is a similar age to me, and he has the platform to do some serious good, but he chose to go in the opposite direction. Even if you only accept it on this one issue, he has done it repeatedly over the last year. He has made these comments. So he has taken this platform that he could use in his position of absolute privilege and just fucked it against the wall. He's done nothing with it. Whereas, as I think it was Janet was saying earlier, people without the platform that are cis, predominantly het, or something along the privileged lines that can challenge him. And so for me, I find it depressive that I can't do more when other people that can don't. But for these other people, they just ignore it. They play the victim, play the Galileo card, and just whine about, oh no, you want to take my privilege away. No, we just want everybody to have the same privilege.
Right. And, I think that it's important for them to, what's the saying that they say that if, when people want equality, it feels like oppression to someone who has privilege. And that's how they feel. I'm sure they feel threatened if they have to give up these things. But I don't really even give that credit to Rationality Rules, because he sought this fight about something that doesn't even impact him. Women's sports doesn't impact him. He sought this fight to take away something from the trans community.
There's just one thing I need to say. It's not a case of, oh, look at poor me, I'm so depressed that I can't help. No, that's not the intent. But yeah, it's just, I'm not the victim here in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, it didn't come across that way. Just a
Thank God for that.
Brandy,
God for that.
Good.
I would posit that, I can't, ascribe motivation to anyone aside from what they say and what can, what the evidence says. But I will say that to be an atheist on YouTube with a pretentious sounding name like Rationality Rules, it is incredibly lucrative to be a horrible anti-trans bigot.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of money. He was making bank on calling for the restriction of the human rights of trans people.
Yeah.
And, that could be, maybe it was a motivation. I will never know unless he says it. But
the thing is, he's saying he's going to give all the advertisement money to charity. Is it Sparkle? Remember, it serves me right?
Yeah. He only said he was giving it on that first video. And for
subsequent videos.
He has never said that he's going to give any of the money made on his correction video.
I thought he did, but
he only said it was on the apology video and the initial video. And after he demonetized the first video, and after he the correction video, he said he was going to hide the first video, which was the one he was donating.
Yeah. The thing is, that's by the by. Yes, it's a nice thing that he's finally doing what EOT said, but he gained Patreons based off that content.
He absolutely did. And I'm just saying the reason why it's important is because he demonetized the video that he was donating on.
Mm-hmm.
So it can no longer make money for Sparkle.
Yeah.
It has monetized his correction video that says the same damn thing the first video said. And but that money is going in his pocket, not to Sparkle. So it is not his I gave money to charity, to trans charities, is in my opinion another smokescreen faux ally move, because he limited how much funds those things can make, and then he released another video restating the exact same stance. I don't give a shit how you package it prettier, is the exact same stance. And then that money is going into his own pocket. So fuck Rationality Rules. That's what I'm gonna say. Go on record right now. Fuck him. And anybody who supports him.
This is why money shouldn't dictate discourse. But I'm just a silly commie. I mean, so of course I'd say that.
I'm a social democrat. I'm weird.
Profiting from his current transphobic video, is he not? Yes. To the best of based upon his own words, yes. He said he was donating from those other videos only. He did not say he was going to donate the money from the last video that he made. So by all appearances, based upon his own words, yes, he's profiting from his transphobia.
Honestly, I think that he should give me some money. And I think he should give Ethel Peters some money. And I think that he should give Erin Green some money. And I think that he should give all the trans people who have dealt with the follow-up from this some money, because we've lost out on spaces where we once felt safe and welcome. We've lost out on time and energy and emotional labor dealing with hateful bigots who are emboldened by this shit.
Yes. And you've also lost Patreons and subscribers. There were people who there were channels that were either transgender hosts and or trans supportive hosts who lost subscribers and or Patreons over this kerfuffle. As Erin. And
I'm sorry, I can't hear that word now without giggling.
Not only has he profited, but he has caused harm, but he's caused a loss of revenue to the people who are the most vulnerable. And that's not okay. And donating it to charity is well and good for the little bit of good it did for the video, but he has a long way to go, even if he were sincere, to make up for the harm he caused. And he's not going to do it. And we know he's not going to do it. So I guess my stance is continue to call out anything that he does going forward, but I'm not going to continue to give him my attention.
Yeah,
Because
I mean, I'm of the position that I'm done with the debates. I'm done debating my existence. I exist. I am, real life on this plane of existence, in the flesh and blood, exist. And my biology determines that I am a woman, that I am female. And if you don't like it, you don't have to accept it, but you do need to respect who I am. Because if you're going to come at me and you're going to purposefully misgender me, that's hate speech. That is harassment. And let me tell you why. Because what the research that has been done demonstrates that when trans people have supportive structures, when they have supportive and inclusive spaces, when we are called by our proper name and pronouns, that leads to positive patient outcomes down the road,
Right.
And if you're going to reject that, you might as well take it a step further and say you want dead trans people, because that's what you're advocating. You don't care about free speech. You care about shitting on trans people. And
I don't. The free speech thing is another area, and I don't want this to go on too awful. I think it's important to point that out. I'm glad you brought it up, because having the ability to say something doesn't mean that people should allow it, stand for it, or tolerate it.
Paradox of tolerance.
You have consequences for the things you say. And if someone wants to question the very existence of another person, damned if I'm going to let them get away with saying it. And I don't care what kind of battles we have to have, how many groups we have to create, how many videos we have to make, it's going to get called out. And I make no apologies for it. We took a lot of grief over creating this group. But this group is a support mechanism for those who were kicked out of their previous safe space. And they were kicked out, whether they were kicked out physically, saying, you're no longer welcome here, or whether they had to leave because they no longer felt safe. You were kicked out. And we created the group with that in mind. And it shouldn't have to be that way. It shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to defend yourself. But as long as you do have to defend your existence, then there needs to be people who can build a community of support.
I just want to say one. Yeah.
You all are in our community. I can't be more proud of our group.
Thanks. I just want to say one final thought on that. Brain, what are you doing to me? Where did the final thought go? It was important. Oh my gosh. Give me a second.
Sorry, I found too long.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Atheist spaces should not accept bigotry on the basis that reduces solidarity. That is what causes division in atheist circles and spaces, is the idea that some atheists are less welcome than others, because you can either invite white supremacist atheists, or you can invite Black, Indigenous, people of color atheists. You can invite trans atheists, or you can invite feminist appropriator atheists or gender critical atheists. You can have disabled atheists, or you can have eugenics atheists. And right now, lots of the atheist spaces are going right to the eugenics, right to the white supremacy, right to the anti-trans bigotry.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because these people are claiming to be more moral than the religious people that they vilify, but they're doing the same things that the religious people they vilify are doing. and it's
It's
a total
more than
mindfuck.
denial.
It's worse because
Yeah.
these are
Yeah,
people
you're right.
I would expect to be on my side, you know, and have my back, and they just fucking don't, because of some perverted idea of science or rationality or reason or any of the other buzzwords. So that's my final thought. I'm going to shut up because we need to wrap this up.
Okay.
Well,
Let's. I want to put in my point about, you know, when Janet asked about what it feels like to be cis. I have no clue. I have known that I was different since I was about 6 years old. I can tell you what it's like to be trans. I can tell you what it's like to have to use the family bathroom at work, because I have to accept the pragmatic reality that if I walk into the women's bathroom, that there may be customers or employees who will be upset by it. And I sure as hell don't belong in the men's bathroom. I can tell you that I have to worry about being a law-abiding citizen, quote unquote, because I do not want to be arrested. I do not want to be thrown in, you know, and it's bad enough, you know, it's bad enough to be incarcerated to begin with. But then on top of that, being a transgender person, when you have a place like, oh, say, Rikers, they have a separate section, sometimes it's solitary or whatever, for transgender people for their protection, okay? There's nothing like that here. That would be in the quote-unquote general population. In general, it's not always true, of course, but in general, people, when they go to jail, even temporarily for whatever, you know, reason it happens to be, don't have to worry too much, despite all the stories to the contrary and the homophobic, and that's exactly what it is, delight in prison rape stories. Most of them don't have to worry about being raped, for the most part. I do. You know, I posted a Malaysia, I forget her last name, is a transgender activist in Mississippi. And like she said, and I'm paraphrasing, but like she said, you know, you don't know what it feels like to be walking down the street and be afraid to be walking down the street in daylight. I do. You don't know what it feels like to go to a job interview and be turned down for job after job after job because you're overqualified, and find out or realize through social cues or anything else that it's because you're transgender. I do. You don't know what it's like to have people vilify who you are as a person and who you are as a subset of society, because, oh no, you know, I wrote a long essay on this a long time ago called Trannies and She-Males and Hookers, Oh My, and about how that's the stereotype of transgender people, especially trans women, that we're all hookers, we're all sex workers. Okay, I do. You know, you don't have to be, you know, worried about, you know, it is still legal in much as my company supports me and my company insurance pays for my meds and my transition and everything else. In this state, this is a right to hire, right to work state, and a right to work company. They can fire me tomorrow because I'm transgender, and I have no legal recourse whatsoever. None.
Right.
Period. Okay. I've been homeless before twice. I've done some things to survive that I wouldn't necessarily consider moral, but I survived. I've done other things that I would, you know, the misogyny against sex workers is doubly right in the trans community. You know, every day, I get hit up by men on Facebook who want local guys who want discreet encounters. Okay, they don't want to be out and open. They don't, you know, and I'm not having a problem with the idea of sex or open sexuality. It's the idea that it has to be hidden somehow because of who I am. You know, in general, cis people don't have to worry about any of these things. They don't have to worry about cops. They don't have to worry about, with the exception of people of color, and that's a different area. But they don't have to worry about all these negative stereotypes and all these negative job hunting and house hunting and trying to get a loan at a bank and whatever. I do. And I deal with that every day. And Tracy pointed out something that I accepted as natural as breathing, because it's been that way for decades, longer than that. But for me personally, because I've only been alive for decades, despite my kids claiming that I'm ancient, but that this person supposedly asked.
Is anybody else having a connection issue with Erin, or is it just me?
No.
Is it lagging for anyone else?
You're like glitching.
No, okay, it's just my connection. Okay.
Okay.
It's probably my.
They asked on their Facebook, what would transgender people do if for 24 hours they could do anything and not have to fear bigotry, not have to worry about getting arrested, not have to worry about getting bashed, not have to worry about getting called out, not have to worry about being criticized or ridiculed? And the answer for most of them was, we'd go swimming. Just something as natural as that to cis people. Oh, let's just go to the park and go swimming, or let's just go wherever and go swimming. I can't do that. I haven't been in a public swimming area other than I wear shorts and a t-shirt when I go with my family in the river, because our town, there's a river that runs right through our town, and you can actually swim in it. But like a public pool or whatever, I've been in that in decades. Because it's, in part of you have to go through the locker room and you have to go through a shower or whatever, and it's segregated by gender, of course, and so I don't even bother. And so that's just something I have to deal with on a daily. There you go. That's just something I have to deal with on a daily basis. Right. So when
helping me out
to wrap it up, asking what it feels like to be a cis person, I have no clue, none whatsoever. I know I've tried to be one. I went into service to prove my manhood. I was married twice. I fathered 2 biological children. I just, and at the point when I left Oklahoma, and this was 1997, was when I first came out to a couple people, one of which was my ex, who I get along with really well. To make a long story short, in part, I told her I have to go, because if I don't, I'm going to kill myself. And I don't want to, and I didn't care about myself at that point, but I don't want that, I didn't want my daughters to grow up knowing that I'd killed myself, and knowing that I had not made at least some attempt to rectify some of the things in my life that needed to be changed.
One thing about trans people in the military, I've heard statistics as high as 25% of trans women serve in the military, as compared to maybe the most liberal estimate I've heard is 10% of U.S. general population. And I think that shows that we're not we shouldn't have to defend our existence, but at the same time, it should show that we're not just useless bumps on logs. We can get out and do stuff. We're capable of getting out there and doing things in the world. I just
Can I say one more thing? Just real quick, is that for some reason, I don't know why, I went to the PSA page and I can see some questions, but then it says 139 comments and I can see 5. I don't know what the heck's up with that. It doesn't like me for whatever reason. Yeah,
there's been a lot of talking during the show. Okay. And it's I've been trying to keep up with it, but I can't promise that I've kept up with it as well as I should. But there have been some good discussion in the chat, so I appreciate that as well.
I can't see the chat, so I don't know what to do.
This talk show format shows me the chat on the screen, but it doesn't show me who's saying it. So sometimes I have to try to guess, who's saying what based on what they said. Yeah, so I try to.
Helps a lot.
Just before we sign off, I'd like to go through a few things. Hopefully, actually ending my interaction on a positive. So it's started off January when you had the Gillette advert, the misogyny and not all men. Horrendous. Then you move forward a little bit. You've got rationality rules, ACA rationality rules, no plum and all that bullshit. And then for me personally, I had my oldest friend finally showed his true colours, and he is a disgusting person. Transphobia, homophobia, racism, Islamophobia, you name it, he's hitting all of these things. So after trying to talk him into sense and reason for months, I finally cut ties with him. My oldest friend, it hurt, but it had to be done. And based on all these things happening in only 5 months of this year, I was questioning whether me bringing children into the world with my ex-partner was a good thing. Yeah. Whether it was the right thing, whether it was moral, ethical. That is until June the 1st of this year, when I went to Pride Festival in Bradford, my local city. I was just there trying to show support for the LGBTQIA plus community and to get a feel for what Pride is about. And I was stood there, we were watching entertainment, we were just looking around the crowd as you do. And there were a mix of many aspects of society. However, the young people, sort of like up to 25 years old, far outnumbered any other demographic. They were holding each other accountable. There was one example where someone had used the wrong pronoun, and they said, "Look, that's not right. This is what my pronoun is." Instead of saying, "Oh, free speech," they then said, "Oh, I'm sorry," insert proper pronoun, and moved on, as they should. There were other examples like this, and obviously the ages are a guess, but it did make me wonder if my parents' generation were really bad, my generation still some really bad people, but not as bad. And these kids, which are a young generation than me, are getting it better. What's it going to be like for my children? Are they going to be in the place where trans people are fully accepted? And
there's
that
a lot
really
more
give me hope.
Because my children are a million times better at being an ally than I am. I try my best to do what's right, but my kids are 100% better than me. And there's so much more access to information that it does give me hope that with each generation, as we learn, there's more understanding. And I don't want to use the word acceptance because I don't think that anyone should be accepted. I think that, you know, it's just a reality that transgender people exist, for example, and homosexual people exist. And I don't want somebody to accept it. I want them to understand it. I want them to just become the reality and not to be questioned. And I think that what you witnessed is where it's heading, and I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful with the federation that they're going to do it better because they have more access to information. They have a better understanding, and it goes all the way back to what we were saying before about gender, you know, being binary, as understood to be binary for so long. The more we learn, the more we can expand and know and adjust. And that's what I hope. That's what I hope.
My daughters are 25 and 32. My oldest daughter is bi, and they're both just as mouthy as I am. I have 8 grandkids, and when the Supreme Court decision came down ratifying equal marriage, the first comment that my oldest daughter made was that if I got married, she damn well better be in the wedding. And this is a comment that Comrade can understand, I think, a little better. But my youngest one, I don't even remember the context, but somebody was disagreeing with me on something. They're no longer on my page. Shucky darns. But about
Funny how that
transgender
works.
people. You know, Chuck. And my youngest happened to be online, whatever, and spoke up and said, this woman is my father, and I'm very proud of her. And anyone who doesn't like it can kiss my big white Irish ass. And as Jan knows, that's something that, that particular phrase they got directly from me. My oldest daughter, when she made a comment that, because she's gotten some grief because she's bi. Even though that's the stereotypical white cishet male fantasy, she still gets crap from it, and so she posted on her Facebook, if you don't like it, you can kiss my ass. I'm bi. If you don't like it, you can kiss my ass. And within about a half an hour, some schmuck had come on, like a friend of a friend of a friend or whatever, had come on my Facebook page and was ranting something, whatever it was, I don't know, anyway. And I was just tired of it, and I told him, I said, if you don't shut up, I'll suck your daddy's dick and make you my stepchild. And her mother posted to me right after that. She goes, now I see where my daughter gets her mouth from. And I'm like, yeah. And I get along with her mother really well. But yeah, so, I see the sea change in between, and it's not all, hunky-dory, but I do see the sea change. I'm the oldest of 10 kids. I have 22 nieces and nephews. They all accept me as I am, every single one of them. They all call me aunt. I've had many little mini family reunions with them, whatever. There's some that live like in California, and there's some that live in the same town that I live in. And so we'll go to the park and whatever. They're completely 100% accepting of me. And because they know that at the end, in the end, it's about loving people for who they are, not who you think they should be, not who you want them to be, not what society tells you them that they should be. And then going, okay, so, in fact, it was, I think, originally in the UK, because of the word, and Ian will understand what I mean, when somebody posted, I think it was under Twitter, but somebody posted, I had a discussion with my son, about my brother and his husband being gay, and it went really horribly bad, and went like this, and my son, I think it was something along the lines of, why do Uncle Bob and Danny hold hands? And I said, because they love each other. And he goes, oh, okay, can I have a biscuit? It's just that simple. Hate is taught. Love is taught. So you make a conscious decision. That's a choice. Being trans
Love is natural. Love is natural. Love is natural. Hate is taught.
Right.
I can see that. But definitely hate is taught. Discrimination is taught. Bigotry is taught. Nationalism is taught. Misogyny is taught. Transphobia is taught. Homophobia is taught. And so when you start breaking down those barriers and showing people that it's all about love and it's all about the positive message that can bring, that's what makes the change in generations. And my last point, because I know we do got to wrap it up here, but since Janet showed her pet, well, actually, okay, I got to show mine. This is Spot. People who are a Lovecraft fan will understand the reference for the name. I'm not going to explain it. You can look it up. But this is Spot. Spot has been with me to a book convention. I've got pictures of, oh, Lordy, must be like 100 pictures with Captain America and Wonder Woman and like a wizard and a knight, and where he's roaming around on steampunk, Warhammer 40K, where he's sitting on the edge of the town like he's going to destroy it. So that's my pet. He doesn't take much to feed, doesn't take much to take care of, and he's good at guarding the house. So I'm done.
Comrade, any final thoughts? I want to make sure that you guys are heard.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah.
That you folks are heard. See, that is kind of key to what I was saying, is like, I still make mistakes. And Erin has beat into my head many, many times to stop saying you guys, and yet I still say it. So I will say, you folks, I would like for everyone to have their final words. And I apologize, but I'm working on it.
No, I'll get it. Thanks.
Eventually.
I appreciate it. When it comes to having kids and whether or not it's moral or ethical, like what Ian was saying, my best friend is someone who I can't. I don't want to go into too much detail because I have my stalkers, but she used to go to church and put money in the collection plate. And after knowing me, she stopped doing that. She stopped putting money in the collection plate. She still goes to church. And she's taken that money and effort that she would put into church stuff and puts it towards queer stuff and trans support stuff. And that's just that's really wonderful. And something she said about having kids when things are so horrible is, you know, people who want kids need to have them so that there can be more kind and loving and patient and understanding people in the world. And not in the quiverful sense of, you know, just have as many babies as possible to push your weird, creepy Jesus religion, but in the sense that we need people and families who promote positive moral values, actual positive moral values, and not just paying lip service to those ideas. So yeah, that's my last thought.
Incidentally, I have 4 children, by the way.
All right, and cool. I no longer put money in the church. I went to church for well over 30 years, and I used to give a lot of my money to the church, and I now support my friends on Patreon. So go visit our list on the group and find a content creator that you enjoy and support them.
Is my stuff on that list?
If it's not, we'll get you on there because cool. We are absolutely wanting to support our the Patreons and the channels and the Twitters and the Instagrams of our members. So I found some content creators through creating this group, and I now support them. So I don't give my money to church anymore. I give it to the people who are making an actual difference in the world.
I just want to make one last note about positivity for me. You know, a lot of people in the atheist communities, and I've done this myself, tend to rant about religious fanatics. And that's true. And there are a lot who are recalcitrant. There are a lot who don't want to change. There are a lot who espouse bigotry and hatred and even in some cases violence. But for 30 odd years, I was a member of a Pentecostal Assembly of God church that espoused speaking in tongues, faith healing, laying on hands. We actually had this was in the 70s, we had bonfires and burned rock records. I helped pass out chick tracts. I was a firm denier and attempted refuter of evolution and the earth sciences. And I've done a little changing since then. So if somebody like me can change, others can too. And I will not extend an open hand, unless it's to slap them, to bigots, but I will extend a conversation to someone who's at least willing to learn or at least willing to consider a different viewpoint.
Yes, that's well said. Well said. If people are open to learning, I'm more than willing to have those discussions. But if somebody's being dishonest or not truthful in their search for answers and or deny the science that's presented, then I'm pretty much just going to assume bad intentions on their part. So if no one else has anything as we leave, then we're going to end the podcast and broadcast and by Spot. I thank you all for joining, and I think it was a lot of fun for me. I hope it was for you as well. And I can't thank you enough for not only joining us, but being part of our community. You mean a lot to us, and we're glad you're with us. Thank you all.
Have a great night, everybody.
Bye.